Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Arna Sahu, host of Arna's News, where on this podcast channel, I aim to eliminate the gender gap in the STEM fields by featuring inspiring female professionals and highlighting their stories and accomplishments to further encourage girls. Today on episode 63.
Okay, so then what do you do when you start to see, like, nobody really knows? And on the one hand, you can kind of feel lost because you're like, oh my God, nobody knows. Like, what do I do? But on the other hand, it's really freeing from that experience. Is you can't take into account too much what other people have to say, but you just have to try stuff. That's the only way you really know for sure, is to try something. There are things where like thousands of people have tried and it hasn't worked. But if you're in an area where it's something kind of new, no one actually knows. And so you just have to try it.
Today on episode 63, I'm pleased to announce our guest, Darlene Damm. As the faculty chair and vice president of impact and community at Singularity University, she leads Singularity University's social impact strategy to help innovators and companies use exponential technologies to solve the world's most urgent problems. Previously at Ashoka, she launched their Changemaker Education Initiative now, active in 30 plus countries, and created major partnerships with Google, Facebook, and LinkedIn to engage parents and teachers to ensure all children learn empathy and change making. Also the founder of the space startup DIY Rockets, an experiment that crowdsourced the development of space technology, and early co-founder of Matternet, one of the world's first commercial drone companies. She is the holder of a patent, writes for a number of media outlets, and often speaks around the world. So thank you so much, Darlene, for being here today. Before we dive into the questions, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, no, I'm so happy to be here and to be part of your podcast. And I'm looking forward to today.
Thank you. So my first question for you is, tell us a bit about your career path.
Yeah, so I think my career actually started when I was really young, because it's always been shaped around my passions. But I grew up in a really small rural town in California that had about 2,000 people, and was there until I was 18. And there were two things that I always cared about. One was helping other people, and growing up with 2,000 people, you see a lot of different things that happen over people's lives. And then I was also really interested in outer space and physics. My grandfather worked on the Apollo missions. And in this little town where I lived, I happened to grow up next door to a man named Percy Roop. And when I was there, when I was a little kid, he was in his 90s. And my mom and dad always encouraged me to go talk to him. And he was the assistant to Dr. Robert Goddard and Esther Goddard when they were inventing the first rockets in the US. So I think when I was 3 or 4, that got into my head, not just space, but this idea you could do anything and you could change the world and you could, do something really crazy. So when I went into college, I went into Stanford actually as a physics major, but I graduated as a history major. And there were a few different things happening. One, I was just interested in so many topics, so I just took a whole lot of different classes. But I was also, I struggled with math, and I couldn't even get through the math to get to the physics classes. And so I wasn't quite sure what to do. And I ended up going down the path of history and working with nonprofits. So then I spent the next few years working with nonprofits and doing work in places like Vietnam, Indonesia, Myanmar, really focused on education and economic empowerment, cross-cultural understanding. And as I went deeper into the nonprofit sector, found that most of the work involves fundraising. And so I tried to learn as much as I could about that and be helpful in that area. And when I was in my 30s, I read an article in the newspaper. It was, I think, the New York Times, about this program called Singularity University. And I missed technology. I was living in Washington, D.C., and at the same time was hearing sort of the first use cases of people using technology to fundraise, text messages, crowdfunders on the internet. It was all new. So I applied to Singularity University to go there as a student. They were using technology to solve social problems. One of the first opportunities and groups of people I met doing that. And I was sort of going in there to figure out how to better fundraise, but I also, in my application, I wrote something about, could you crowdsource the development of a rocket ship? I went and did that program. It was 10 weeks. I thought I was just going to be like in a sort of a classroom learning stuff. And it turns out everybody who enrolled in that program was given this mission to create a startup using exponential technology to improve the lives of 1 billion people. Okay, so then that was a huge change in my life, because I ended up helping co-found a startup called the MatterNet, which pioneered the drone transport industry. And we worked on it at the university, but then it got picked up by CNN. And then over the next 1 to 2 years, a whole industry was born. And I realized, oh my goodness. So we were thinking about using drones to deliver medicine in places where people were walking 8 hours to get access to a clinic. But I realized I'm thinking about solving social problems the whole wrong way. I could spend decades trying to solve some of these problems, and something like a flying robot could, create a solution, within a few years. So then I came back to Singularity to teach full time, to help other people learn how do you use technology to solve social problems. And I've been there now since 2011, when I went there as a student. So that's how I got to where I am today.
I absolutely love that. I mean, from, your early career, starting with, your neighbor and your grandpa telling you all about, space, you kind of changed that trajectory in college, although, you majored in something much different than it. You kind of follow that passion of STEM and, encouraging people to make the world a better place. And, you created MatterNet, which is super cool, and a whole industry was born.
Yes, yes. Yeah. I think when I was in college, it was you had two paths. You could do something technical, or you could do something soft and social. And but that's not true. Actually, there's there's hundreds of people today running startups using technology to solve social problems. And it's anything from, you could go into technology and you could be working on decoding the language of whales and communicating with whales. One of our students at Singularity is an actress from Italy, and she's now running a company in East Africa called Kukua, which is it creates games and cartoons and learning opportunities for kids. So she's using her actress and entertainment background to run a startup. There's teachers running ed tech companies. There's there's people who are working on using satellite data to conserve forests. It's just anything you want to do now, it's possible.
Yeah, because technology is a tool after all. So it could be something, in another field that you're interested in.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So my question for you is, what advice would you give someone wanting to pursue a career similar to yours? And do you have any tips to succeed?
Yeah, yeah. So the question I always ask myself, and I'm still asking myself, is what can I do to help the most number of people in the world, in terms of solving a really huge, meaningful problem that hasn't been figured out? So that's been the guiding question my whole life. And I realize now, looking back, I was shaping my career and my education around solving real problems. So it's easy to when you're in school, or when you're in your first jobs, to think about, okay, how do I accomplish what's in front of me and be the best at it, right? How do I get a good grade? How do I graduate? How do I get good ratings on my first job? How do I like just accomplish and survive through all of that, right? But if you live and work that way, you're kind of always doing what other people expect you to do. But if you shape your life around solving a real problem, then it doesn't really matter if you're doing things differently than other people. So, I'm working on technology, but I have a history major. That doesn't matter because it's about they're both useful in solving a real problem. So one I would say is think about like the problems you really care about, and then shape what choices you make around is this going to help me solve that problem?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, because typically we're kind of trained to think of, oh, what's that next big shiny toy? What's that next title? And it's
Yeah.
kind of this race where you're going to exhaust yourself. Yeah, and like as a student, I can definitely feel that, but I feel like in the professional setting, that's like much more conducive to that type of environment. But if you're trying to solve a problem or something really broad, then there's so many things that you can do. There's so much room for creativity, and you could just kind of thrive in that place versus trying to find that shiny toy.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I had like two rules that I live by. Like one was I need to be able to pay my bills. So, I can do whatever I want, but I have to be independent, right? Because that's your freedom. You can do whatever you want if you can do that. And then the second one was, don't break the law or hurt people, like obviously, but beyond that, everything's possible. It really is.
Absolutely. And my question for you is, what is a common myth about your profession that you want to debunk?
Mm. So I think one is there's just like the huge variety of people working in technology from all different backgrounds, and that you can learn skills later in life. You don't have to go back to school to learn certain things. Like everything that I've learned in the past like 10 or 15 years, I've actually learned from my peers or from educating myself by reading. And I think a lot of people still think like, oh, okay, so I'm working in accounting now. I would like to be working on biodiversity, but I don't want to spend all that money to go back to school and it'll take years. Like that's actually not how it works. Like all you need to do is be like, hey, I'm an accountant, and does your organization need accounting? You work in biodiversity, and then you start to build a bridge, and you meet people, and then you learn by doing, right? So you can change your career a lot, and you can do a lot of different interesting things in the world. That's one myth. And I think the other myth is around risk taking. So I actually did one of those DNA tests. It was to learn about my ancestry, but they told me I was the highest percentage of risk takers in the world. And that really surprised me because I thought, okay, well, yes, I do all these things, but I'm not a reckless person. But then I realized I was confusing being reckless with risk taking. So like, I think the other thing that's important is like, it's really important to take risks, and you shouldn't ever like endanger your life or your health. And you need to be, financially stable. But beyond that, like psychologically, you should be taking risks all the time. Like you should be doing things that are hard. You should be doing things where you're alone. You should be doing things that people tell you will never work. Like you should be doing things before people tell you you're ready for it. Like that's how how to do all of this, is to just go out there and start doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree because the first part, even if you think that you can't apply your skills or, things that you do to other companies or places, chances are that there is probably a role out there waiting for you and you just have to seize that opportunity. But also about the risk taking, I feel like a lot of people think that risk taking is only for like the reckless people. But in reality, if you don't take that opportunity, then that's kind of being pretty rash and not thinking through that. And, there might be something really great waiting out there for you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So if you could step into my shoes or younger self, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't?
Yeah. So I I'm so impressed with you. Like, you know, when I hear from you on LinkedIn and that you're running this podcast, and then you're, you know, you're just so well organized. You're leading, like, you know, a small business already. And so my question for you would be like, what else do you want to do? Because what you're doing now, it takes a lot of people several decades to learn, to figure out how to do that, but you're already there. So I would say, you know, just keep going. And, you know, if there's something that you want, like, you're ready now. Like, you could create a startup if you wanted right now, and you could run it. You could, you know, it's just unlimited what's possible.
Thank you. Those are such amazing compliments. I really love that. But I liked what you said about what else do you want to do with your life, or what else do you want to do? Because I feel like often, as students, especially, we kind of can restrict ourselves to what we're going to major in or the things that we're studying. So, say for example, you know, a kid's really interested in, you know, doing, I don't know, studying medicine. That kid's probably just going to think about, you know, being a doctor his whole life. And you know, maybe that kid won't be satiated with being a doctor. So you can always think about what else do you want to do with the time that you have, because after all, life is all about being happy.
Yes, yes. Yep, that's right. Yeah.
Yes. And what are the best resources slash books that have helped you find your career path?
Yeah. So one thing in my life right now that's really important is actually LinkedIn. And over the last, I guess, 10 years, I've connected with a lot of people who are running companies, who are creating startups, who are running initiatives, and they're sharing what they're doing every day. And it's like firsthand knowledge of what is happening in biotechnology, what is happening in 3D printed houses, like what is happening in carbon removal. Like, so like getting firsthand information from the people trying to solve that problem is just, it's priceless. So LinkedIn should be, is super helpful, but you have to connect to the right people. By the way, there's a woman that reached out to me from Santiago, Chile, who's 16 years old, Alyssa Durney, and she's running an initiative with 1,500 girls around the world on quantum computing. And so, like, you know, they're in countries all over the world, and they find a local speaker who teaches them. So they're teaching themselves quantum computing, right? So it's like you can learn from LinkedIn, but you can also like educate yourself and connect with people around you, and find like-minded people. So I'd say that's actually the number one resource that I use right now.
That's amazing. Literally, you know, teaching yourself quantum computing, but also teaching other people and finding those mentors. That's
Yeah.
an amazing initiative. I truly applaud her.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, also with LinkedIn, there's like so many amazing resources out there, because on your feed, not only does it show what your other connections like, but they also show what like the big people are doing, the LinkedIn top voices. And over there, frequently a lot of people share a bunch of free licenses or certifications that you can take, and those can really help you find more jobs or internships or careers that can really help propel your life.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Like it's just the most incredible network for, I mean, I guess that's why they exist for careers, right? But it's really valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, and even if you might be a young student, don't even fret. Like, definitely open up that app and, you know, just put in all the things that you've done, even though it might not be that much, because you can definitely connect with other people and mentors that you can finally find.
Yes. Yep. Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, and it's as internet access expands around the world, it's truly global. So at work, I've been working with a gentleman who lives next door to a refugee settlement on the Uganda-Congo border. His name is Brainy Swaibu, and he's a teacher there, and he's creating a whole innovation center, right? And he has intermittent access to the internet, but he's on LinkedIn all the time and learning about new technologies, and he has access to generative AI now. So he's actually where he lives, like his school doesn't have windows still, like there's no money, but he has access to all this knowledge. And he's using AI to help teach his students. And he's using it to fundraise, and he's using it to create strategies for his school, right? So the online tools we have available, there's LinkedIn, but there's all these other tools out there that can now like close the gap between someone in Silicon Valley and someone, you know, on the other side of the world in a jungle, right? Like, so we've been working with him for several months and we've never met him. So there's just so much opportunity.
Absolutely. There's like so much power with AI now because, ChatGPT is amazing. But, things like LinkedIn, they can give you so many opportunities. You just have to ask and put in, the hours to do so and find those valuable connections because they are good connections and they're also not that good connections. So just trying to differentiate the two.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And what do you think is a vital factor that shaped your career? What was your life before learning it, and what was your life after learning it?
Yeah. So going to Singularity, where I work now as a student, was a turning point for me because it gave me a new framework to understand how the world works. So Singularity focuses on exponential technologies. And when I first heard that, I was like, wait, I remember algebra and these equations we did that were about exponentials. That was it. And then I started to understand. So, computer chips, they're they're called exponential, and digital technologies are called exponential because they fall in cost while they get better, and they don't just get a little bit better, they double in their sophistication and their capacity, right? And they scale. And that was important to me because as someone who cared about social impact problems, you're always dealing with complex problems. You're always dealing with not enough money. And you're always dealing with a lot of people that have a challenge. So I was like, wow, so if you can use a digital technology to solve a social problem, it'll be affordable, it'll be scalable, and it will get better and better and better. And exponential technologies today, like, things are actually moving much, much, much faster than how they were when I first learned about them, in 2011. But it helped me understand, like, one, we can actually solve a lot of these problems that we just did not have the tools to solve 10 years ago. Things that have been plaguing humanity for hundreds of years, we can now solve them with this tech. But it also helped me see how our world is changing, right? And I think a lot of people feel lost right now because it seems like everything's moving so fast and everything's changing and everything's chaotic. But if you understand how technology behaves, you start to be able to predict, oh, it's not that chaotic. It's just following this different pattern, right? And so that helped me feel like, going from feeling like overwhelmed by, climate change or overwhelmed by all of these things, like, actually we have a solution and it'll work and we can just do it, right? So that was really empowering for me.
I mean, I love that because I feel like back in the day, technology didn't exist. So making a social, change in like the world might have been much more difficult. And, with the rise of technology, people might have thought that it was really chaotic and scary and intimidating. But I mean, yeah, technology can really make things so much more accessible and affordable for people. Like, just if you have like the best type of post on LinkedIn, I'll use this for an example, then you can get so much traffic to that post. So
Yeah.
you can get so much drive to whatever you're doing because of the use of technology and social media.
Yes. Yeah. And so it's a power. And one of the things I've seen, like, so at Singularity, we work with a lot of innovators, and in terms of women in in technology, while a lot of the numbers are, it's 20% female founders or 2% are receiving investment, like, we have like, the last time we checked, 80% of our companies had a female founder, right? And it's because they used, well, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is, like, if you can use a powerful technology, you will leapfrog ahead, right? And no one can stop you. right? So it's also it's a tool. It changes power dynamics. It changes, like, it's just a superpower, and you've got to grab it and see what you can do with it.
100% agree. It's a superpower and you have to grab it.
Yes, yes, yeah.
And because we have some additional time, my question for you is what's one thing you wish you had known when you began your career path?
Mm. So I think I wish I had known nobody's in charge of anything. Um, when I started, there were people who were, who were managing me, or people who were higher up than me. And I think I thought that everybody knew what to do and what was going on, right? And that they had the answers. And then when we started working on the drone company Matternet, so that actually, when we tried to launch that company, all of the experts and all of the people who were experienced in the industry said this is a terrible idea, right? So they said this is the technology doesn't work, the company's illegal, there's no market, like you don't it's too soon, all these things, right? But it turns out they were wrong. Okay, so then what do you do when you start to see, like, nobody really knows? And on the one hand, you can kind of feel lost because you're like, oh my God, nobody knows. Like, what do I do? But on the other hand, it's really freeing, right? And so what I learned from that experience is you can't take into account too much what other people have to say, but you just have to try stuff. That's the only way you really know for sure, is to try something. There are things where, like, thousands of people have tried and it hasn't worked. But if you're in an area where it's something kind of new, no one actually knows. And so you just have to try it. And similarly, like, it's easy to look around the world, and if you see things that are wrong, or you see things that aren't working, or you see problems, it's easy to blame people and say, well, so and so did that, right? But my question is, well, like, they just stepped up and they did that. Nobody told them to, right? So why don't you or I step up and do something better, right? We can do that too. So that's like, I don't know, that's how I found the world works. Like, there are barriers, there are challenges, the world's not fair, it's unequal, right? There's always, like, things that are going to be in the way, but if you try something, you usually get somewhere, and sometimes you get really far. So yeah, put
I
yourself
love
in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I love that because if you try something, you'll definitely get it because, you're a true testament to it because Matternet, it was like the first thing in the industry of making drones, and, making them as ways that could be transportation devices. But a lot of people were like naysayers and they probably said, oh, that's a horrible idea. It's gonna flop. But you actually went through it. You broke those tradition and those norms of, listening to those people and you did the things that you wanted to do. You tried it, you tested it out, and it created its own marketplace.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. And there was a similar, so I also tried to create a startup that would crowdsource 3D printed rocket engines, right? And with that startup, so basically I challenged the world to design rocket engines using 3D printers. And it was really early at the time. So I ran like a competition to see if people could do that, and I was surprised that like 10 teams signed up, and the teams ranged from a group of girls in a junior high to professional teams that were professional space companies to university students. And with that one, I couldn't figure out like the business model for that company, but I proved that you could take this technology that nobody thought was possible, and with just a little bit of incentive, break through and help launch that industry, right? So the top two teams were hired by Rocket Lab and Boeing, right? And so it was like, there's a lot of different ways you can change things and make progress in the world.
Absolutely. I love how you trailblazed that for them because, although it might have been something against, the social norms, you did
Yeah.
that with your incentives and, it actually succeeded.
Yeah, and it wasn't that big of an incentive. Like I think we had a $5,000 or $10,000 prize, right? So it's again, it's this like this message of you something can look really, really, really hard, but sometimes just taking that first step is what opens it up, and then other people come in and they do different things too, right? But yeah.
Absolutely. And my last question for you before we end off the interview is how do you continue to learn in order to stay on top of things within your role?
Yeah. So um I'm a big believer in learning by doing. So at Singularity, I lead a part of the company where people are using technology to solve problems in their local communities. Um, and like if you attempt to like run a real project, you're going to actually learn by doing, right? So if you go and you read, that's one thing, but once you go out there in the field and you start learning, or you start working on something, you then start learning. So one is just like pick a project that you care about and see if you can solve it. And even if you only get like 1 week into that, you will leave having learned something that is really important, right? I think the second one is talking to a lot of different people, and uh, just getting different perspectives, reading a lot. Yeah, I think my attitude is that everything you do, there's something to learn from.
Yes, because regardless of what it may be, because, as I said before, you're a true testament to what's being said here because, you tried out things, you didn't know if they were going to succeed, but you came out of it learning something that, oh, this is a cool marketplace. You actually trailblazed it and you did something that, people may have thought was not going to happen.
Yeah, yep, exactly.
So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Darlene, for being here today. Before we end off, do you have any last word to the audience?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. And I hope like I just anyone who's listening is that you go out and try to do something that matters. Like one other thing about Singularity that was important to me is I had a community of people that cared about the same things that I did and made that normal. And it's like a strong community. And so I think when you first step out to go do something that matters, it's really hard, right? Or you start to try something new, it's really difficult. It's just like a big black hole, like you're jumping off a cliff. But then once you get out there, you start to meet other people and they actually care about the same things that you care about. And it feels so good to be able to have that community, and then you start learning from each other and you start doing things together, and then suddenly like you look back and you're like, wow, my life is really different. I'm a really different person. And and there's everything has changed for the better. So I just say go out there and learn, keep an open mind, follow your dreams, like do things how you want to do them, and as as you are, and that everything's possible.
Well, thank you so much, Darlene, for being here today. I love chatting with you, and I hope you have the best rest of your day.
You too. Thank you so much.
And here are my 3 cents on this episode with Darlene Damm. 1. Career path and motivation. Her career path demonstrates the importance of identifying one's passions and combining them with problem solving. Her early exposure to space exploration and her interest in helping others guided her choices. This illustrates the significance of aligning your career path with your personal values and seeking ways to contribute meaningfully. Learning through experience and taking risks. Darlene's advice highlights the power of learning by doing and taking calculated risks. She emphasizes that skills can be acquired through real-world experiences and interactions with peers. This distinction between risk-taking and recklessness is essential, encouraging individuals to step outside their comfort zones while prioritizing safety. This suggests that hands-on experience is a valuable teacher in professional growth. And 3, adaptability and problem solving. Darlene's journey underscores the need for adaptability and continuous learning. She transitioned from a physics major to a history and explored diverse areas, showcasing the flexibility needed to address emerging challenges. Her involvement with Singularity University and her startup underscores the ability to shift gears and pivot when opportunities arise, which is vital in today's rapidly evolving job landscape. Thus, that concludes the episode for this week. If you want to know more about how I relate to these amazing topics, then stay tuned for upcoming episodes. A free way to support this show is by leaving it a 5-star rating and a review on the player you are listening to. Let me know what you enjoy about this podcast, as it's a chance to tell me what you love about the show, and it helps others discover it too. Once again, thank you for finding me, and I hope we stay in touch with each other. Zito, you're listening to Arna Sahu, the host of Arna's News. Toodles!